When the Mafia boss's deaf son gasped at a sound for the first time in his life, the world didn't just shift, it cracked open. And the maid who pulled an impossible creature from his ear suddenly became the most dangerous, most hunted woman in America. Welcome back, my wonderful family and friends. If you're hooked in and excited to dive into this tale, click subscribe and tell me in the comments where you're watching from, because tomorrow, I'll have another captivating story just like this one, and you won't want to miss it. Now, let's get started. Bella Vita City glittered the way only corrupt cities could. Golden at the surface, rotting beautifully underneath. Domenico Il Drago Vellucci stood at the top of the marble staircase in his Virginia estate, watching the sunrise smear itself across the sky like a guilty man wiping off evidence. The household stirred quietly below him, guards adjusting holsters, maids setting out fine china, the chef muttering curses in Italian at a misbehaving egg. But Domenico didn't care about any of it. He cared about the boy sitting alone on the living room carpet, building a puzzle that was far too complicated for an 8-year-old and finishing it with the calm precision of a surgeon. Luca Vellucci, his son, his weakness, his undoing. Domenico descended the stairs with a softness that would have terrified anyone who knew him. The dragon did not do soft. He did intimidation, he did vengeance, and he did immaculate suit jackets. Soft was for the dead. Yet here he was, adjusting his steps so the boy wouldn't feel the vibration and look up in alarm. Luca didn't hear his father's approach. But he sensed the shift in the air the way children sometimes do. Instinctively, without reason. He raised his gaze briefly, offered a small polite smile, then returned to the puzzle. Domenico inhaled sharply. 8 years. 8 years of silence, and he still hadn't heard the boy say a single word. Not even Dad. And somehow, that word cut deeper than any bullet ever had. The only person Luca reacted to with warmth was Naomi Carter. As if summoned by thought, she entered the room from the hallway, carrying fresh laundry, her dark uniform crisp, her hair tied neatly, and her expression calm in a way Domenico found both irritating and inconveniently grounding. She walked past 3 armed guards as though they were coat racks. "Good morning, Mr. Vellucci," she said, her voice as smooth as warm honey. He nodded, but Luca lit up. Truly lit up. His face brightened, his posture softened, and he abandoned his puzzle entirely to go tug gently at Naomi's sleeve. She knelt, signing quickly, her hands moving with the grace of someone who understood communication was not just sound. Luca grinned at whatever she signed back. Domenico looked away, jaw tight. He was grateful for her, yes, but there was something about Naomi that made him feel as though someone was rearranging furniture inside his ribcage. "Breakfast is almost ready," Naomi said as she rose. "And someone already stole 2 strawberries from the bowl." Luca raised both hands in theatrical innocence. Domenico exhaled a sound that was dangerously close to a laugh. Naomi smiled, then headed toward the kitchen, laundry basket in hand. Luca followed her like a small shadow, the charm in her pocket humming softly, unnoticed by all except her. Domenico watched them go, tension knotting his shoulders again. Naomi Carter was too calm, too intuitive, too something. And when a man ran a criminal empire, something was a problem. He turned toward his office just as a guard hurried down the hallway. "Boss, we had a small situation outside. Nothing serious," the guard said. "The kid was with Naomi when it happened." Domenico's blood iced. "What situation?" The guard swallowed. "Sir, someone spotted a large centipede near the boy." There was a half-second of silence before Domenico's expression hardened into volcanic steel. "In this house," he growled. "No, sir, outside the gates. Naomi took care of it before it got near him." Took care of it? What did that even mean? Domenico strode past the guard without another word, pacing the hall until the irritation drained into something else. Something he didn't like to feel. Worry. It was ridiculous. A bug. He commanded armies of men, not insects. But Luca was different. He pressed a hand to his jaw, exhaled, and forced himself to calm down. Then he froze. From the kitchen came Naomi's voice, gentle, warm, and amused. And from Luca came a burst of laughter. Silent laughter, yes. But his body shook, and his smile widened, and Domenico felt a sting in his chest he couldn't swallow. He walked toward them, slow, hesitant. Naomi was slicing fruit. Luca sat beside her, sketching something in his notebook. Something circular. Something with too many legs. Naomi glanced up. He's drawing what scared him earlier, she said. Domenico studied the drawing and frowned. That's not a small centipede. No, Naomi said. It wasn't. Her voice carried an odd heaviness. One Domenico couldn't place. Luca tapped the paper, signing something. Naomi translated without missing a beat. He says it felt like it was whispering. Domenico blinked hard. Whispering. Naomi nodded, hiding the flicker of anxiety in her eyes. The charm in her pocket warmed, just enough to make her spine stiffen. Domenico didn't notice the way she subtly placed her free hand over it. Nor did he notice Luca watching it, as if the charm itself glowed. But he noticed when Luca suddenly flinched. The boy pressed a hand to his right ear. Naomi's eyes widened. Not again. Luca trembled, breathing quickening. His other hand flew up to cover the side of his head. Domenico's heart plummeted. Luca! But the boy didn't respond. His eyes flooded with panic. His lips parted soundlessly. Naomi stepped forward immediately. Mr. Vellucci, let me. Domenico didn't argue. Naomi knelt in front of Luca, her voice low and soothing. Breathe with me, little lion. Luca's breaths were trembling, shallow, and frantic. She reached into her pocket. The charm pulsed. Once, twice, like a heartbeat. Naomi closed her eyes. I didn't want to use you, she whispered to it, too quietly for Domenico to hear. But he needs you. She pressed the charm to Luca's right ear. The world shifted. And something inside Luca moved. Naomi inhaled sharply. Domenico stepped forward, alarmed. What are you doing? Naomi ignored him, brushing Luca's hair back, leaning closer. And then she reached inside his ear. Domenico's breath caught when he saw it. Her fingers closing around something moving, something slick, something far too long. She pulled. A centipede slid free. Domenico recoiled in disgust. What the? Then, Luca gasped. A sound. A sharp, unmistakable sound. Naomi froze. Domenico's blood turned electric. Luca stared at them both, wide-eyed, terrified by the noise he himself had made. Then, shaky and small, he whispered, Dad. Domenico staggered as if someone had shot him through the chest. Naomi stared in horror at the charm, glowing faintly in her hand. And somewhere, far beyond Bella Vita, far beyond the waking world, something ancient felt the charm awaken. Something that had been waiting. Something ancient felt the charm awaken. Naomi didn't move at first. She was frozen in a crouch on the kitchen floor, one hand gripping the charm, its surface now dimming back to ordinary wood, as if pretending innocence, and the other hovering near Luca, afraid even to breathe wrong. Domenico stood a few feet away, stunned, his face drained of color. His son's small voice still echoed in his mind, replaying itself like a miracle, trying to convince him it was real. Dad. The boy's lips trembled as he stared up at Domenico, shocked by his own ability to make noise. His eyes darted from Naomi's hand to his father's expression, searching for meaning, for stability, something to hold on to as his senses betrayed him. Naomi felt the boy shaking. She instinctively placed a steadying hand on his back. Luca, she whispered, the name leaving her lips with a tremor she couldn't hide. It's all right. You're okay. The boy's breath hitched. He flinched at the sound of her voice which he had never heard before. He stared at her mouth moving, then at the air as though sound itself were a creature he wasn't prepared to meet. Domenico finally managed a word. Rough, hoarse, nothing like the man who usually commanded armies. Luca! The boy turned toward him. And Domenico's heart broke clean open. He dropped to his knees so fast the marble floor cracked faintly beneath him. Luca startled at the noise. Another sound. Another shock. Naomi reached to calm him, but Domenico was already there, steadying his son's shoulders with trembling hands. Say it again, he breathed. Luca, son, say it again. Naomi shot him a sharp look. He's overwhelmed. Don't push. But Luca interrupted her. Dad. Domenico jerked as if struck. Naomi covered her mouth with her hand, tears burning behind her eyes, and she hated it. Emotions complicated clarity. And clarity was the one thing she could not afford to lose right now. The charm pulsed again, tiny, subtle, but she felt it like a warning whispered in her bones. She closed her fingers tightly around it. And that was when Domenico's shock finally gave way to rage. He lifted his head. His expression sharpened from awe into suspicion, like glass heated and plunged into ice. "What did you do?" His voice was low. Dangerous. "Naomi, what the hell did you do to my son?" Naomi rose slowly, forcing herself to be calm. "I didn't do anything to harm him. You reached into his ear and pulled out a—" He pointed at the discarded centipede on the floor, twitching in its final spasms. "That thing isn't normal." "No," Naomi answered carefully. "It wasn't. And now he can hear." Domenico's hands flexed into fists. "Do you think that's a coincidence?" She held her ground. "I can explain. But not here. And not like this." He rose, towered over her. The dragon had returned. "You will explain now." Luca startled at the harsh tone, flinching again from the sound itself. Naomi moved closer instinctively, putting herself slightly between father and son. "Mr. Vellucci," she said softly, "he's hearing the world for the first time. Every sound is an attack right now. Every movement is loud. He needs quiet. He needs safety." The mobster and the maid locked eyes in a silent war. Then Luca whimpered. Naomi turned immediately, kneeling to him again. The boy pressed his hands to his ears, trembling at every faint rustle of movement, every whisper of air conditioning, and every distant clang from the kitchen's metal racks. He shook uncontrollably. Naomi lowered her forehead to his, speaking barely above a breath. "You're all right, little lion. I'm here." Luca's breathing slowed. Just enough. Domenico stared at them, at his rigid, powerful world bending around this woman he barely knew. Her presence disarmed the boy, stabilized him, quieted him. And it was the first time in 8 years that Domenico couldn't fix something himself. The helplessness made him furious. "Both of you," he said sharply. "Get up. Office. Now." Naomi met his glare. "I'm not taking him anywhere until he's steady." Domenico opened his mouth to bark a retort, but Luca made a tiny sound, the smallest frightened inhale. And Domenico deflated. "Fine," he muttered through clenched teeth. "Here. Talk here." Naomi exhaled shakily. She didn't want to talk here. The kitchen felt too exposed. The charm pulsed again like a tiny heartbeat against her fingertips. Domenico planted a hand on the marble counter, steadying himself as though the room had tilted. He looked at her, into her, voice raw. "Naomi, how did my son just hear my voice?" She closed her eyes briefly. She had hoped she would never have to say this. Not to a mafia boss. Not to a man who believed control was the only real power. "Because," she whispered, "something was blocking his hearing. Something was placed there." Domenico's jaw knotted. Placed. Not by accident. He stared at her as if reading a code in her face. "Who would put something in my son's ear?" Naomi swallowed. "The same person who's been waiting for that charm to awaken." Domenico tensed. "Charm." Her hand moved, from her pocket, slowly, deliberately. She opened her fingers. The carved talisman rested in her palm, warm and quiet now, but still carrying the weight of something alive beneath the surface. Domenico's eyes narrowed. "What is that?" Naomi looked straight into his eyes. No fear, only the truth she had carried her whole life. "It's the reason Luca was deaf." A beat. "And it's the reason he isn't anymore." Domenico went still. Completely still. Luca leaned into Naomi's side, seeking comfort from the onslaught of new, overwhelming sounds. But Domenico didn't look at his son. He looked at the charm. And something ancient, far away, smiled. Domenico didn't move. He stared at the charm as though it were a live grenade, one he wasn't sure whether to disarm or throw. The kitchen lights flickered again, subtle, but enough for Naomi to tighten her grip on Luca. The boy whimpered at the sudden brightness shift, pressing closer into her side. That tiny sound, barely more than a frightened breath, shook Domenico harder than any gunshot ever had. "Explain," he said at last. The word was low, but no longer sharp. It was the voice of a man walking toward the truth the way one walks toward a coffin. Slow, heavy, braced for devastation. "Start talking, Naomi. I want the truth." Naomi inhaled slowly. She had always known this moment would come. She just hadn't expected it to come with flickering lights and a mafia boss staring at her like she held the key to his soul. My family, she began softly, comes from a long line of women who practiced something we called ancestral sight. It's not magic. Not in the storybook sense. It's older. Deeper. A connection to the world before it was tamed. Domenico's jaw flexed. And this sight put a creature in my child's ear? No, she said quickly. Something else did that. Something that's been hunting the charm for generations. But the charm is what allowed me to remove it without hurting him. He stepped closer. Why would anyone want to hurt my boy? Naomi didn't answer immediately. Because the real answer was cruel. Because of you. Because of your power. Because he's your heir. Instead, she said carefully, there are old forces that attach themselves to bloodlines. Some are more vulnerable than others. Domenico scoffed. My bloodline is not vulnerable. Everything has a vulnerability, she replied. Even dragons. His eyes snapped up. Sharp. Stung. But beneath the offended pride, Naomi saw something deeper. Fear. She lowered her gaze to Luca, brushing a curl from his forehead. The boy relaxed under her touch but flinched again at a distant noise, the thud of someone closing a door down the hall. Domenico noticed. What happens now? He asked quietly. Naomi hesitated. Now, we keep him calm. He's processing more in 20 minutes than most people do in a day. And something may try to follow the charm's awakening. Domenico's eyes hardened. Follow? As in come here. Yes. The silence that followed was thick. Heavy. Electric. Domenico straightened to his full height. He wasn't a desperate father in this moment. He was Il Drago again. The ruthless man who ruled Bellavita City's underworld with precision and iron will. My son is not a target, he growled. Not for your ancestors. Not for your demons. Not for anyone. Naomi met his glare without flinching. You're not fighting a criminal cartel, Domenico. Or a rival syndicate. You're fighting something you can't shoot. Everything dies, he said. One way or another. Before Naomi could answer, a new voice cut through the room. Well, well, it drawled. Looks like I arrived just in time for story hour. Both Naomi and Domenico turned. Matteo Vellucci leaned against the doorframe, hands in his pockets, tie loosened like he'd practiced perfect casual arrogance in the mirror. His smile was slick, almost rehearsed, and entirely too pleased. He wasn't looking at Domenico. He was looking at the charm in Naomi's hand. Brother, Matteo said smoothly, I heard something unbelievable happened. Domenico tensed. Naomi shifted subtly, positioning Luca behind her. Matteo clicked his tongue. Relax. I'm only here to congratulate the little prince. Hearing it for the first time. Beautiful truly. Miraculous. He tilted his head, smirking. Quite the coincidence, don't you think? Naomi's stomach dropped. He knew. Domenico stepped forward. Matteo. Now isn't the time. Oh, but it is. Matteo pushed off the doorframe and strolled in, eyeing Luca with unsettling interest. You've kept so many secrets in this house, brother. It's refreshing to see a new one come to light. Naomi tightened her hold on Luca. Something in Matteo's expression made her skin crawl. He wasn't surprised. He was satisfied. I'll ask once, Domenico said coldly. Why are you here? For the same reason you should be panicking, Matteo replied. Because whatever she woke up tonight, he nodded toward Naomi, won't stop with one miracle. Naomi's pulse spiked. Matteo, she murmured dangerously, what do you know about my charm? Matteo smiled wider. Too wide. Everything, he said. And before Domenico could reach him, before Naomi could even stand, Matteo leaned down just enough to whisper to Luca. He's coming for you, little prince. And he always gets what belongs to him. Luca froze. Naomi's blood ran cold. Domenico lunged. But Matteo had already slipped back toward the doorway, smirk in place, voice airy. Oh, and brother, you might want to lock your windows tonight. The bone whisperer travels fast. Then he was gone. The room fell silent. Breathless. Cold. Naomi clutched the charm so hard it dug into her skin. Domenico stared at the doorway Matteo had disappeared through, fists trembling with rage and fear he couldn't hide. Luca whispered, tiny and terrified. "Mommy." Naomi's heart cracked. Domenico's world was shattered. And the lights flickered again. But this time, they didn't turn back on. Darkness swallowed the room so completely that for a breathless second, Naomi wondered if the world itself had blinked. She grabbed Luca instantly, pulling him flush against her chest. His small fingers dug into her shirt, trembling. His breath hitched, new sounds, unfamiliar sounds. Fear made louder by the fact he could finally hear it. "Stay still," she whispered. She wasn't sure if she said it for him, or for herself. A scrape sounded beside her, Domenico's shoes against tile. Slow, calculated, the movement of a predator adjusting to a cage suddenly plunged into shadow. "Backup generators should have kicked in," he growled. "Something's wrong." No, someone was wrong. Several someones. The mansion had never failed before. The Vellucci estate was built like Fort Knox mated with a paranoid billionaire's bunker. For the lights to go out, every safeguard had to be killed simultaneously. Naomi swallowed. This wasn't an outage. This was a message. "Domenico," she said softly into the dark. "The Bone Whisperer might already be." A sound cut her off. Not loud. Not even threatening. A tap. Slow. Measured. Too precise. Tap, tap, tap. It echoed down the hallway like bones clicking rhythmically together. Luca whimpered. Naomi felt him jerk with each tap, the rhythm burrowing into him like a memory he never had, but somehow recognized. Something ancient vibrated faintly through the charm in her hand, pulsing with growing urgency. Domenico moved closer until she felt the heat of him beside her. He leaned in, voice low. "Get him behind me." She didn't argue. She guided Luca gently, keeping her hands on his shoulders until the boy was shielded by Domenico's frame. Another tap. Closer. This one was followed by something else. A dragging sound, like fabric whispering across the floor. Naomi's nails bit into her palm. Her ancestors had whispered warnings about the Bone Whisperer since before she was born. A collector of stolen relics. A hunter of spiritual debts. A being who fed not on flesh, but on silence. Domenico reached into his jacket. Metal clicked. He had a gun. "Whatever that is," he muttered. "It bleeds." No, Naomi thought. No, it doesn't. The mansion's emergency lights flickered once. Gray-blue, faint, just enough to outline Domenico's silhouette, standing like a wall between danger and his son. Then, a voice drifted down the hallway. Not a shout. Not a hiss. A whisper that slid into the room like cold smoke. "Little one, I hear your heartbeat now." Luca's knees buckled. Naomi reacted instantly, pulling him close. She bent, pressing her forehead to his, whispering in calm, steady breaths. "You're safe. I've got you. Listen to my voice." But the whisper continued, soft and coaxing. "You carry what was stolen from me. Return it. And your silence will return too." Domenico's rage ignited like gunpowder. "You touch my boy," he snarled, "and I'll." The whisper laughed. Not loud. Not joyful. Empty. Naomi felt the temperature in the room drop. Breath puffed from her lips in pale clouds. The charm throbbed violently, alive, terrified, warning. Domenico raised his gun. "Show yourself." A shape appeared at the end of the hall, cut out in the faint emergency glow. Tall. Bent. Bones wrapped in fabric that hung like a wilted shadow. A mask carved from ivory, smooth and expressionless except for blackened grooves where eyes should be. The Bone Whisperer. Every instinct Naomi had screamed to run, but running wouldn't help. He wasn't bound by walls. Or distance. Or rules meant for living things. The figure tilted its head. "Dragon," the whisper said. "You do not own what she holds." Naomi stepped forward before she realized she'd moved. "Yes," she said, voice shaking but firming as she went. "He does. Because I do. And I'm not giving it back." The mask turned toward her. The tap of bone against tile echoed again. Tap, tap, tap. "You awakened it. You broke the pact." "And the boy?" The figure leaned forward slightly, as if smelling Luca through the dark. "The boy bears the mark of its power. That was never meant for him." Something like a cold hand brushed Naomi's spine. She kept her ground. Domenico did not wait for another word. He was fired. The shot cracked through the hallway, deafeningly loud. Luca cried out, covering his ears. The bullet hit the bone whisperer, and passed right through him. He didn't flinch. Didn't stagger. Didn't bleed. The whisper came again, almost amused. You fire metal at ash. You threaten shadows with fists. How quaint. Domenico stepped forward, fury boiling underneath his skin. I don't care what you are. You're not touching him. I'll tear apart whatever world you crawled out of. The mask shifted, as if smiling. Brave. For a man made of fear. Naomi felt something rising. Pressure, thick as smoke. The air pulsed. The lights dimmed again. The charm's hum turned sharp, painful. And then, Luca stepped forward. Naomi's breath caught. Luca, no. But the boy moved past her reach, silent tears on his cheeks, drawn to the bone whisperer like gravity. He wasn't hypnotized. Naomi sensed that much. But he was connected. Bonded through the charm. Through what had been removed from him. Through what had awakened tonight. The bone whisperer crouched slightly to meet the boy's eye level, voice low and coaxing. Let me return you to the quiet, little prince. A world without fear. Without pain. Without sound. Luca shook his head once. A small but fierce gesture. Then, he whispered. No. The bone whisperer froze. Domenico froze. Naomi's heart slammed into her ribs. The boy raised his chin. I want to hear my dad. The whisper that followed was colder than the grave. Then you will all suffer for what was stolen. The bone whisperer lifted a hand. Naomi braced for an attack. But instead, he vanished. Lights snapped back on at full brightness. Heat rushed into the room. The charm went silent. Domenico exhaled shakily, lowering his gun. Naomi dropped to her knees, pulling Luca into her arms, trembling with relief and terror. Domenico stood over them, chest heaving, staring at the empty hallway. He's coming back, Naomi whispered. Domenico didn't look at her. He looked at the spot Matteo had disappeared earlier. No, he growled. He never left. Domenico didn't blink. Didn't breathe. Didn't look away from the hallway where the bone whisperer had vanished. He never left, he said again, quieter this time, like a realization that tasted like poison. Naomi tightened her grip on Luca. His small hands clutched her shirt, knuckles pale, heart hammering against her ribs. She felt every tremor through him. The mansion was bright again, every chandelier blazing. But the brightness felt wrong. Too sharp, too sterile, like a hospital after a nightmare. The kind of light that tried too hard to convince you that nothing horrifying had been standing in the dark seconds ago. Domenico finally tore his gaze from the hallway and crouched in front of them. Slowly. Carefully. Like he was approaching a wounded animal and didn't want to bleed. Luca, he said softly. Look at me. The boy lifted his head, eyes red and wet but steady. Domenico's voice broke on the edges. You did good, figlio mio. Luca swallowed, then whispered. Dad, that voice, it wanted to take my hearing again. The raw fear in those words sliced through Naomi. Domenico's jaw tightened in a way she had never seen, like he wanted to hunt down fear itself and shoot it in the face. He placed a hand on Luca's cheek. No one will take anything from you. Ever. I promise. Luca nodded once, exhausted. He leaned into his father's hand, small fingers gripping Domenico's sleeve. Then his knees buckled. Naomi reacted first, catching him as his weight sagged sideways. He's exhausted. And overstimulated. He just heard a gunshot for the first time in his life. Domenico ran a hand over Luca's hair, guilt flashing hot across his face. I shouldn't have fired. You didn't know, Naomi murmured. I should have, he countered, voice low and laced with self-loathing. Naomi shook her head. No one is prepared for whatever that thing was. The charm in her pocket pulsed once, weak, as if recovering from the spiritual equivalent of a sprint. She pressed her hand against it through the fabric. Domenico noticed. His eyes narrowed. That charm. It reacted before he arrived. She hesitated. It reacts to what it recognizes. What is he? Domenico asked. His voice was calm. Too calm. The quiet before a dragon burns a village to ash. Naomi debated lying. Not to protect herself, but him. Because the truth wasn't something sharp you could cut with. It was something that swallowed. She opened her mouth to speak, but footsteps echoed down the hall. Heavy. Booted. Human. Enzo, the head of security, burst around the corner with 3 guards behind him, guns drawn. Sweat streaked his forehead, eyes darting around like he expected demons taped to the ceiling. Boss. What the hell happened? The camera blacked out. Generators stalled. Sensors fried. And you weren't answering your phone. Domenico rose, slow and precise. Search the house. Every room. Every exit. Every vent. If a shadow looks wrong, shoot it. Enzo swallowed. With bullets or, like, holy water? Domenico stared. Enzo shut up. The guard sprinted off. Domenico turned back to Naomi and Luca. We're moving. Naomi blinked. Where? Panic room. His tone brooked no argument. That thing appeared inside my home. My son is not staying in an open hallway. Luca leaned weakly against Naomi. I can walk, he whispered. It was technically true, but not convincingly. Naomi started to lift him, but Domenico held out his arms. Give him to me. She hesitated only a moment before shifting Luca into his father's hold. Domenico held his son like he weighed nothing. One arm under Luca's knees, the other bracing his back, protective in a way that felt old, like a memory that had waited years to be relived. Naomi followed as Domenico stepped down the hallway, every movement measured, controlled. She stayed close enough for Luca to reach out and touch her shoulder with one small hand, grounding himself. The transition from the brightly lit hallway into the deeper corridor felt like walking into a throat, narrow, humming with tension. Naomi kept glancing behind them, expecting a tapping sound, or a whisper, or a bone-white mask appearing in the corner of vision. But nothing came. Each step echoed too loudly. Domenico, she murmured, the bone whisperer doesn't move like a living person. He won't trigger your alarms. He won't leave footprints. Security won't find him. Let them try, he snapped softly. His anger wasn't directed at her, but at the fact he couldn't control this. And Domenico Vellucci had built an empire on controlling everything. They reached the reinforced steel door at the end of the corridor. Domenico shifted Luca to one arm, pressed his palm to the biometric scanner, and the heavy lock clicked open. Inside, the panic room was surprisingly warm. Soft lighting, couches, medical kits, and a stocked kitchenette. Not a bunker. A sanctuary. Built for a child. Naomi hadn't known this existed. Domenico carried Luca inside and lowered him carefully onto the couch. Luca immediately curled on his side, exhausted but watching the door with wide, cautious eyes. Domenico stepped back out of the room. Naomi blinked. Where are you going? He met her gaze with a cold steadiness that told her the truth before he said it. To get my brother. The hallway lights glinted off his expression. Something carved from rage, fear, and certainty. Matteo brought that thing into our world, he said. And he's going to tell me how to kill it. Naomi stepped forward. Domenico. He paused. Don't go alone, she whispered. For the first time since the lights had gone out, something flickered across his face. An unguarded crack in the armor. Fear. Not for himself. For Luca. For him, Domenico said quietly. I would face hell alone. That is hell, she said. And it knows your name. Their eyes locked. For a moment, the silence between them was heavier than the darkness had been. Domenico exhaled once, sharply, then stepped backward into the corridor. I'll be back before he wakes. The door slid shut with a heavy hiss. Naomi turned toward Luca. He stared at the sealed door, small fingers gripping the blanket. Naomi. His voice wavered. Yes, baby. Is Dad coming back? She sat beside him, brushing a curl from his forehead. Yes, she whispered. He'll always come back. But as she spoke, the charm warmed in her pocket. And for the first time, it pulsed in fear. The charm's pulse hit like a heartbeat under Naomi's palm. Rapid, uneven, terrified. It wasn't a warning. It was a plea. Naomi froze. Luca noticed immediately. His eyes, still too bright, too aware, followed the movement of her hand to her pocket. "What does it mean?" he whispered. She forced her breath steady. "It means, stay close to me." The panic room hummed softly with filtered air. Its gentle were mechanical lullaby. Too gentle. Too safe. Naomi knew safety, this perfect safety, was a lie. The kind that cracked the moment you exhaled too loudly. Luca sat up a little, the blanket falling from his shoulder. The echo of fear from moments earlier still clung to him, but something new flickered too. Curiosity, courage, that quiet bravery children had before the world taught them to choose fear instead. He held out his hand. "For the charm," he said. "I want to hold it." Naomi hesitated. The charm rarely reacted to touch. But tonight, it had behaved like something alive. Something that wanted to choose. She pulled it out. The carved piece of ancestral stone rested in her palm, smooth and warm, etched with symbols older than any book Luca would ever read. It hummed faintly with something like breath. Luca cupped both hands together, waiting. "You sure?" she asked softly. He nodded. "It helped me. I should help it back." Her heart cracked, painfully tender. She placed the charm into his palms. Immediately, the hum softened. The warmth grew gentle and protective, like the charm exhaled in relief. Luca smiled faintly. "It likes me." "It does," she whispered. "It chose you that night." He looked up. "But why?" Before she could answer, something rattled above them. Both their heads snapped up. The panic room's ceiling vibrated, metal humming against metal, as if something scraped along the vents. Slowly. Deliberately. Far too heavy to be a rat. Far too purposeful to be anything mechanical. Naomi's blood turned cold. Luca gripped the charm tightly, instinctively pressing it to his chest. "Is he back?" he whispered. "I don't know," she said, though she did. She knew that rhythm, that subtle scrape like bone against steel. The bone whisperer hadn't left. He had simply changed his angle. The lights flickered, not off, but dimming just slightly, like the room exhaled with dread. Naomi shifted closer to Luca and pulled him against her side. She held her breath, listening. Nothing. Silence. Then, a voice spoke through the vents. Not a whisper. Not a threat. A murmur. Almost affectionate. "You cling to your mother's relic, little one." As she clung to hers. As her mother clung to hers. Naomi's fingers dug into Luca's shoulder instinctively. The bone whisperer knew her lineage. "But you cannot cling to what was never yours." Luca pressed his face into her arm, trembling. Naomi forced her voice steady. "You don't belong here. Leave this boy alone." The vents creaked softly. "So brave. So loud," the bone whisperer whispered back, voice sliding through the metal like smoke. "Your line was meant to watch, not interfere. You have broken the balance." "You mean I saved him?" "Saved." A soft laugh drifted down. "You gifted him sound. A sense he was not meant to have. Do you think your world is the only one with rules? With consequences?" Naomi swallowed. "What consequences?" The voice stilled. Then answered. "He can hear me now." Luca's breath stuttered. He lifted his head, eyes wide, terrified. "No," Naomi whispered. "Don't listen to him." But the bone whisperer wasn't speaking to Naomi anymore. He was speaking directly to Luca. "I know what you fear. Hearing is pain. Noise is chaos. But silence is safe. Silence is home." Luca squeezed the charm tighter. "Stop," he whispered, barely audible. The bone whisperer continued, voice soft as winter. "I can take you back to the quiet. The world before the breathing, the talking, and the breaking. You don't have to hear the gunshots. You don't have to hear fear." Luca's face twisted. Not confused, not tempted, but angry. The first spark of rage Naomi had ever seen in him. "I want to hear," he whispered fiercely. "I want to hear her. And him." Naomi's throat tightened. She didn't dare breathe. The bone whisperer paused. Then, quietly, "Then I will break the world to unmake this." Naomi stood. "No," she said sharply. "You will not touch him." The vents groaned, metal bending inward slightly, like something pushed against them from the other side. Naomi stepped in front of Luca. The lights flickered again. Then, they heard footsteps outside the panic room door. Heavy. Swift. Familiar. Domenico. Before Naomi could call out, the door hissed, and Domenico stepped inside, breathing hard, eyes blazing. He took one look at Luca clinging to the charm. One look at Naomi standing protectively in front of him. One look at the ceiling vent bowing downward. And rage ignited behind his eyes. "What happened?" he demanded. "The Bone Whisperer," Naomi said, motioning upward. "He's in the vents." Domenico didn't look up. He looked at Luca. "Did he speak to you?" Luca nodded, trembling. Something snapped inside Domenico. Not loudly, not visibly, but Naomi felt it like a shockwave. A father's breaking point. He strode toward them, lowering himself to Luca's level, eyes hard with a promise the world should fear. "He will never touch you," Domenico said, every word a vow carved from fury. "Not in the dark. Not in your dreams. Not in any world." Luca nodded, tears brimming. The vent creaked again. Domenico slowly looked up. "He's still here," Naomi whispered. Domenico stood, slow, lethal, and ancient in his wrath. "So am I." Then he reached into his jacket and pulled out something Naomi had never seen him carry. A dagger. Old. Carved. Etched with symbols she recognized from the charm. Her breath caught. "Where did you get that?" Domenico didn't look away from the vent. "It wasn't Matteo," he said quietly. "He didn't bring the Bone Whisperer here." Naomi's heart pounded. "What are you saying?" He finally met her eyes. And the truth hit like thunder. "My grandmother did." Naomi stared at him. For a heartbeat, the room felt hollow, like the air had been scooped out and she was trying to breathe inside a vacuum. "Your grandmother?" she whispered. Domenico kept his gaze locked onto hers. Unmoving. Unblinking. Holding a truth he clearly didn't want to hold. "Nana brought him here," he said quietly. She didn't say it outright. She didn't have to. The panic room hummed around them. Air filters, faint lights, the subtle vibration of steel walls. But somehow all Naomi could hear was Luca's breathing behind her. Shallow. Scared. Naomi swallowed hard. Why would she summon something like the Bone Whisperer? Why would she risk Luca? Domenico lifted the blade. Just slightly. Not in threat. More in explanation. The dagger was old. Not antique old. Ancestral old. Its handle wrapped in worn leather, its blade etched with spirals and symbols Naomi recognized from her grandmother's stories. Marks of binding, sealing, and sacrifice. Naomi's breath caught. That's not Italian. That's from my. "I know," Domenico said. He held the dagger out between them. "Nana had this in a locked chest. One she never let anyone touch. I confronted her. She didn't deny it. She said she'd been waiting for the echo to return." Naomi's pulse hammered. The charm in Luca's hands warmed, reacting to the dagger. Two old instruments recognizing each other after decades apart. "She brought him," Naomi whispered, putting the pieces together. "Not to hurt Luca, but to test him." Domenico nodded once, jaw tight. She said the boy's silence was unnatural. That something had taken what wasn't theirs. Naomi closed her eyes for half a second. Her chest felt like it was tightening around her ribs. If Nana Elisabetta had invited the Bone Whisperer into this world, she had done it believing she wasn't summoning destruction, but balance. Domenico sheathed the dagger at his hip. "I don't know her full part in this. But I know one thing. Whatever she started, I'm ending." Above them the vent groaned again. Metal bowed just a fraction, dust falling like ash. Luca shrank against Naomi's side, but his eyes were on the dagger now. His fingers curled protectively around the charm. Naomi lowered herself to his level. "You okay, baby?" Luca nodded, but his voice was thin. "Is Nana bad?" "No," Domenico said, stepping closer and kneeling in front of his son. "She loves you more than anyone. She thought she was helping. But she brought him," Luca whispered. Domenico's expression tightened. She didn't know what he really wanted. Naomi added gently, "Sometimes people think they understand old things, but old things have their own rules." Luca swallowed and pressed the charm to his chest. A small, defiant gesture. The vent above them creaked again. Louder this time, like a weight shifted. Something dragged slowly along the ductwork, metal vibrating under it. Domenico stood. He reached out and placed a hand on Naomi's arm. Not rough. Not commanding. Grounding. "We're leaving," he said. "The panic room isn't secure anymore." Naomi's eyes widened. "If he gets in." "He won't," Domenico cut in. "Because we'll be gone before he does." The vent dented downward visibly now, an unmistakable bulge forming in the metal. Luca whimpered, hugging the charm. Naomi stepped in front of him by instinct. Domenico moved to the door. The keypad blinked green under his palm. The heavy door hissed open. But before Naomi could usher Luca out, the Bone Whisperer's voice slid through the vent, so close it felt like it whispered straight into her ear. "Little prince, you cannot run from what is inside you." Luca cried out and covered his ears. Naomi spun around, stepping between him and the vent, rage sparking through her veins. "You don't get to talk to him," she snapped. "You're not his anything." A low chuckle fluttered from the dark. "Not yet." The vent above them buckled with a metallic bang. That was enough. Domenico grabbed Luca, lifting him swiftly but gently. "Move," he ordered. Naomi did. They stepped through the door together. And for the first time since the power outage, Naomi felt the cold air on her arms. Not Bone Whisperer cold. Real cold. The corridor beyond the panic room was dark. The lights that had been restored minutes earlier were now dead. Not flickering. Not dim. Dead. "Generators out," Naomi whispered. "No," Domenico said. "Something killed it." They stood there, Naomi, Domenico carrying Luca, all three breathing quietly, staring down the long windowless corridor. A faint light pulsed at the far end. Not white. Not yellow. Green. Sick, soft, unnatural green. The Bone Whisperer's sigil. Domenico's grip tightened on Luca. "We're going upstairs. Now." Naomi nodded. They moved, quiet, fast, careful, every step deliberate. The corridor stretched out before them, but the light at the far end didn't get brighter or dimmer. It stayed the same. "This isn't normal," Naomi whispered. "The light should change as we get closer." "We're not getting closer," Domenico said grimly. "It's not a light. It's a marker." "A marker for what?" she asked. His jaw flexed. "For him." A sound echoed down the corridor. Not tapping. Not bone. Footsteps. Slow. Heavy. Footsteps that didn't match the Bone Whisperer's rhythm. Naomi's blood froze. "These aren't his," she whispered. Domenico adjusted Luca in his arms. "Whoever it is, we're not meeting them in a hallway with one exit." He motioned toward the stairs. They started moving toward them. Quick, precise, silent. But just as they reached the stairwell door, the footsteps stopped. A voice, human, amused, and painfully familiar, called down the hall. "Well, well." Naomi's heart dropped. Domenico slowly turned. A figure stepped into the faint green glow. Elegant jacket. Crisp shirt. A smile carved from arrogance. Matteo Vellucci. Domenico's brother. He clapped slowly, mockingly, letting the sound echo. "You always did know how to pick dramatic exits," Matteo said. "But leaving the party before I arrive? Rude." Naomi's stomach twisted. Domenico's voice dropped to a lethal whisper. "What did you do?" Matteo smirked. "Oh, brother. I didn't bring the Bone Whisperer to our door." He stepped fully into the corridor. "I brought him into our family." Naomi felt Luca tense in Domenico's arms, like a string pulled too tight, and she instinctively stepped closer to them as Matteo's silhouette sharpened in the green glow. That sickly light flickered across his face, carving out a smile that had no business belonging to a living human. Domenico didn't move. Didn't blink. But something inside him shifted. Naomi could feel it. The calm before a man like him became an earthquake. "Explain," Domenico said, his voice low enough to rattle glass, if there had been any left intact. Matteo held up his hands, palms open, as if he were about to give a TED Talk titled How to Betray Your Mafia Family in 3 Easy Steps. "Oh, come on, Dom." Don't make this dramatic. You know our family. We've always had a little history with the unusual. Naomi's pulse kicked. Unusual? You helped summon a creature that lives on stolen souls. Mateo arched a brow. Technically, I didn't summon him. I just facilitated a reunion. He pointed lazily at the charm against Luca's chest. That belonged to him first. I simply returned the family heirloom. Naomi stepped forward before she registered moving. That charm was stolen from him because he abused it. Because he used it to bind children. Yes, yes, Mateo cut in, rolling his eyes. The bedtime stories. Except our dear Nana never told you all the details, did she? He flicked a bit of dust from his sleeve. The charm doesn't bind children. It chooses heirs. Luca is not his heir, Naomi snapped. Mateo smiled wider. Oh, but he already is. Luca whimpered softly, burying his face against Domenico's shoulder. Domenico's grip shifted protectively. You're done talking. Am I? Mateo tilted his head, studying his brother. Because you haven't asked why. Domenico narrowed his eyes. Because I don't care. But Naomi, she cared enough to feel her stomach sink. Because Mateo's tone, the smug tilt of his voice, hinted at something monstrous beneath the surface. Mateo stepped forward, the green glow pulsing faintly behind him like a heartbeat. I did it, he said softly, because you were never meant to be head of this family. Ah, there it was. Naomi felt the crack of truth like a whip. This again. Domenico growled. I inherited. You gambled. Mateo's eyes darkened. I gambled because Nana always said there were two branches of the Vellucci bloodline. One that dealt with money, and one that dealt with the old arts. Naomi stiffened. Domenico froze. You're lying. Really? Mateo purred. Then why did she give you the dagger? Naomi's heart lurched. Domenico flinched, not visibly, but internally, like something sharp hit a nerve. Because you can wield it, Mateo went on. Because it interacts with your bloodline. The same bloodline the Bone Whisperer recognizes. And the same bloodline he wants passed to an heir. He pointed again at Luca. Your son. Domenico stepped forward, voice like a blade. You want to get near my kid? He pointed to the floor. That's where you'll end up. Mateo sked like an irritated maitre d'. Oh, Dom. You always think with bullets when you should think with legacy. Then, a scraping sound tore through the corridor. The green glow behind Mateo elongated, stretching along the wall, tall and thin and spined. A silhouette that didn't belong to Mateo at all. Naomi's blood ran cold. The Bone Whisperer was near. Close. Maybe already here. Mateo didn't look back. Didn't flinch. He just smiled. He and I have an arrangement, he said. He gets the charm. I get the throne. There is no throne, Domenico snarled. There is only family. Oh. Mateo's grin sharpened. Then why do you keep acting like a king? Naomi sensed the tension peaking. Two brothers on the edge of an old, open wound. But they didn't have the luxury of finishing this argument. The silhouette behind Mateo flickered, and elongated again. Naomi grabbed Domenico's arm. We need to move. Now. Mateo chuckled. Run if you like. But he'll catch up eventually. He always. A hand shot from the darkness behind him. Bone white. Long-fingered. Too many joints. It seized Mateo's shoulder. Mateo's smirk faltered. Well, that's new. Naomi's heart slammed. Move, move, move. Domenico didn't hesitate. He bolted up the stairwell with Luca in his arms, legs taking steps two at a time. Naomi followed, shoving the door shut behind them just as Mateo's startled scream echoed down the corridor. Dom! Domenico! Wait! The Bone Whisperer's voice rolled after him like a cold wind. Your bloodline calls to me. Naomi nearly tripped. Domenico tightened his jaw and kept climbing. Luca buried his face again and whispered, barely audible. He's coming. Domenico didn't slow. Not if I get him first. They burst onto the ground floor hallway, dimly lit by the emergency strips along the floorboards. The mansion felt huge and hollow. Rooms once warm are now shadows. Walls humming with something ancient. Naomi touched Domenico's arm. "Where are we going?" "To the garage," he said. "We get Luca out. You with him." Naomi blinked. "You're coming too?" "No," he didn't look back. He just kept running. "I'm going to finish what Nana started," he said. Naomi grabbed his arm, forcing him to stop. "You can't fight that thing alone." Domenico stared at her, a storm in his eyes, fear buried beneath fury. "I have the dagger," he said. "And he wants my son. That means he wants me first." Naomi shook her head. "That's exactly why you shouldn't." "No," he interrupted. "That's why I have to." Luca lifted his head, eyes wet. "Dad." Domenico breathed out. Shaky. Human. He cupped Luca's cheek with one hand. "I'll find you," he whispered. "I swear it." "Dad, no." Naomi's throat tightened. Something inside her cracked sharply. Domenico pressed his forehead to Luca's. "You're my whole world," he murmured. "And I'm not letting anything take you from me." A slow, creeping cold began sliding into the hallway. The Bone Whisperer was approaching. Naomi grabbed Luca's hand and tugged gently. "We have to go." Domenico stood straighter, shoulders squared, every inch the man the city feared. "Take care of him," he said. Then he reached for the dagger at his hip and turned toward the darkness gathering at the end of the hall. Naomi whispered, "Please come back." Domenico didn't answer. He walked toward the Bone Whisperer, and the lights around them began to shatter one by one. The hallway lights blew out in a chain reaction. Pop, pop, pop. Each burst carving Domenico's silhouette in strobing fragments. A raised shoulder, the tilt of his jaw, and the glint of the dagger's blade at his hip. The darkness swelled from the other end like ink poured into water, thickening, gathering a shape. Naomi didn't watch. She couldn't. She hauled Luca down the corridor toward the side exit, her fingers wrapped tight around his trembling hand. His breaths came in small, frightened hiccups. Every sound he heard still felt new and sharp, and the monstrous things pursuing them only made that sharper. "Naomi," he whispered. "Don't leave him." "I'm not," she said, voice cracking. "We're giving him room to fight. That's all." A lie. A thin one. But Luca needed it. They reached the garage door. Naomi shoved the release latch, and the metal panel rattled upward, revealing the dark garage filled with Velucci cars, sleek black machines that looked like panthers waiting to pounce. Naomi pushed Luca toward the armored SUV. "In. Buckle up." He obeyed, though his hand shook so badly. He clipped the seatbelt twice before getting it in. Naomi leapt into the driver's seat and froze at the reflection in the rearview mirror. A shadow crossed behind her. A shape too tall, too bent, too ancient. The Bone Whisperer was inside the garage. The charm on Luca's chest pulsed violently, its hum rising in pitch. Luca gasped, clutching it. "Naomi. He's here." She whipped around just as something scraped down the cement floor. But it wasn't the Bone Whisperer. It was Matteo. He stumbled into the dim headlights of the SUV, clutching his arm, pale, shaking, haunted. Behind him, the garage door shuddered, warped, and slid closed as if commanded. Matteo limped forward. "Naomi, please help me, he'll kill me, Naomi gripped the wheel. "Get away from the car." "Naomi, I didn't know." Matteo sobbed, steps dragging. "I thought he would he said he'd make me stronger, he lied. Naomi, he lied." "He's a centuries-old soul eater," she snapped. What part sounded trustworthy? Matteo collapsed onto his knees, gasping. "Help me, please." Something cold pressed through the air. Slow. Purposeful. Luca whimpered. "Naomi." He's behind him. The Bone Whisperer materialized behind Matteo. Tall, chalk white, skin stretched too tightly across his angular frame. A crown of bone shards jutted from his head like broken antlers. His eyes were pits, no whites, no iris, just hollow darkness that seemed to drink everything in. The Bone Whisperer placed one elongated hand on Matteo's shoulder. Matteo screamed, a raw, animal sound, as his spine arched and his breath hitched. It was not a scream of pain. It was a scream of a man realizing he was already dead. Naomi slammed the SUV into reverse. The headlights flared, and for the first time, she saw the Bone Whisperer clearly. He didn't turn toward the car. He turned toward Luca. His jaw unhinged slightly, as though sensing something delicious. "Bloodborne," he rasped, voice like bone dragged across stone. "Heir of the pact." Luca shrank against the seat. Naomi floored the gas. The SUV roared backward. Tires skidded. But the Bone Whisperer moved faster. With impossible grace, he stepped sideways, dragging Matteo with him like a puppet on strings, avoiding the vehicle entirely. Matteo's form slumped. His breath shuddered twice more. Then stopped. Luca cried out. "Naomi, Dad!" She swerved the SUV, heart pounding. They needed Domenico. Nah. She slammed the vehicle into drive and shot toward the exit at the far side of the garage. The Bone Whisperer didn't chase them. He merely watched, head tilting as if assessing a delicate artwork. When the SUV burst through the side gate onto the moonlit grass, Naomi braked hard. Domenico stood outside. Alive. Barely. His suit was torn and streaked with dust and something darker. The dagger hung limp in his hand, and his left arm shook uncontrollably. His eyes, though. His eyes were wild with refusal to die. Naomi threw the SUV door open. "Get in." Domenico didn't move. He looked past her, toward the garage, where the Bone Whisperer now stepped through the gate as though the metal were mist. Domenico turned back to Naomi and Luca, and closed the SUV door. "Drive." Luca sobbed. "Dad, no." Naomi slammed her palm against the window. "Get in the car." Domenico took a breath that sounded like Judgment Day and lifted the dagger again. "He wants me. Not him." "No." Naomi cried. "He wants the charm. He wants Luca." Domenico faltered. The truth hit him with the force of 10 years of guilt and 8 years of fear merging into one. But it wasn't Naomi who stepped out of the car. It was Luca. He flung open the back door and ran toward his father before Naomi could scream. "Dad!" Domenico caught him, barely, lifting him with one arm. "What are you doing?" Luca pressed the charm into his father's hand. "Use it." Naomi felt her heart drop. "No, Luca." But the charm pulsed, bright as a lantern, responding not to Naomi, not to the Bone Whisperer, but to Domenico. The Bone Whisperer hissed sharply, recoiling. Domenico stared at the charm glowing violently in his palm. What do I do?" Naomi's voice broke. "You command it. Your bloodline responds to it. That's why Nana gave you the dagger. You're the only one who can use both." The Bone Whisperer's shadow stretched across the grass, reaching for them. Domenico tightened his grip around Luca. Then he lifted the glowing charm and dagger together. "Leave my son," he growled, "and take this instead." He slammed both artifacts together. A shockwave burst outward. The Bone Whisperer screamed, soundless but earth-shaking. His form splintered into white cracks of light. Naomi shielded her eyes. Luca clung to his father. And Domenico held steady, every muscle in his battered body taut as the charm burned brighter, brighter, brighter. Until with a blinding flash, the Bone Whisperer shattered into dust. Silence fell so completely that Naomi heard her own heartbeat. Domenico dropped to his knees, clutching Luca tightly. "It's okay," he whispered into his son's hair. "It's okay. It's over." Naomi ran to them, dropping beside them. Luca threw his arms around both of them, sobbing into their shoulders. Domenico looked at Naomi the way a drowning man looks at oxygen. "You saved him," he whispered. Naomi shook her head, tears streaking. "You saved him." Luca lifted his face between them, his voice trembling but certain. "You saved each other." The charm in Domenico's hand finally dimmed, settling into silence. The impossible had happened twice. Luca had heard, and the monster had fallen. But as Naomi touched Domenico's cheek, he leaned into her hand, exhausted and alive, and she realized. There was one more impossible thing happening. They had become a family. And nothing, not Mafia power, not ancient curses, not bone-white monsters, could touch that now. They walked back toward the SUV together. Luca held both their hands. They didn't look back. The end. Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. It's as crazy and intriguing as you can ever imagine. So do check it out. Click on the image showing on your screen right now to watch the next one.